Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to another episode here of the Budding Watch Enthusiast. Here in this channel, I review and discuss wristwatches from the perspective of a newer watch collector. If you enjoy what you see here in this video, do me a favor, click the red subscribe button and ring the bell icon down below. So in this video, I wanted to talk about Kickstarter a little bit when it comes to watches. Kickstarter is, of course, probably the world's most famous and most successful crowdfunding platform, and to no surprise, it's a platform that's been used quite a bit, especially by newer microbrand watch companies, and it's a great way to get that initial capital built up so that you can actually fund that first watch that you produce, so that it's not just a concept, it's actually a product that you're able to make. But from the buyer's perspective, sometimes Kickstarter might not be the way to go at all points. So I'm coming into this discussion as somebody who has backed over 40 Kickstarter campaigns. Now, most of them were not watch related. The vast majority of them are tabletop game related, which is another industry that's benefited majorly from the use of Kickstarter. However, I will also tell you that the first mechanical watch that I ever purchased, the Sal Baltimore Founders Edition, was the byproduct of a Kickstarter campaign. Since then, my wife has also supported the second Sal Baltimore Kickstarter campaign for the Torsk Diver. But to date, those are the only two watch Kickstarters that I've ever personally participated in as well. So like I said, I just wanted to go through, talk about the benefits of Kickstarter from the buyer's perspective, but also talk about some of the negatives that can come from Kickstarter as well from the buyer's perspective when it comes to wristwatches. And before we get into it, my wristwatch check for this video, quite appropriate, the NTH Neckin Renegade. NTH was one of those companies that got their start on Kickstarter and has since been able to kind of graduate, I guess you could say, from the Kickstarter platform in order to do just regular pre-orders. So let's go into the pros first. And the most obvious pro that comes from Kickstarter is the fact that as a buyer, you can often get a massive discount over what the MSRP of the watch is going to end up being when it's all said and done. Again, Kickstarter is used mostly by newer watch companies that don't have that capital built up, so that in order to kind of get the buyer to take a chance on a new company, take a chance on a company that is unproven, that doesn't have the track record of experience that you would normally like to see when buying a product, especially when spending a couple $100s at least on a product, they incentivize the buyers, the backers in the case of Kickstarter, with a discount on the watch. Sometimes I've seen as much as like half off of what the MSRP is going to be. And I know what you're saying, why would the company do this? Because it's cutting into their profit margins. If you're a newer watch company, what you are buying is kind of that equity of being a successful brand, the track record of having delivered a successful product, so that hopefully the next watch you launch or next time you decide to launch a watch, that you don't have to offer such a steep discount. Or you're hoping that the folks that, that back the campaign, that get the watch at a steep discount, then kind of become like evangelists for your brand, and then you'll sell more watches than you normally would have at the regular price. But as a buyer, it's a great way to, like I said, to save some money on a watch you might be interested in, and all you have to pay in return is kind of taking a chance on an unproven product. The second big pro, and this is my favorite aspect of backing Kickstarters, is that you as a buyer, from most companies, not every brand does this, but most brands kind of give you, you get a lot more insight and you get a lot more information on the development process than you would from other watch companies. Usually, most brands on Kickstarter like to keep their backers engaged throughout the campaign and after the campaign, for that matter as well. And that usually comes in the form of sending out periodic updates on the project as it goes along. Now, some of those updates might be adding new add-ons like straps and things of that nature. It might just be production updates, hey, production samples are in, or this, that, or the other. But I always enjoy getting those updates. I always enjoy seeing how the campaign is going. Obviously, if it's bad news, which doesn't happen very often, they're not the most fun updates to get in the entire world. But like I said, for the most part, I do enjoy the level of engagement that comes in that more intimate backer setting, is that you're just kind of getting those updates and kind of learning more about the project than you might normally would if you were just pre-ordering it off of a regular website from a brand. And finally, the biggest pro in the column for why watch Kickstarters are great is because a lot of times if not for the Kickstarter, then the watch doesn't get made. Again, Kickstarter is an option that is typically utilized by newer companies especially. And so if you can't drum up the interest in the watch, if you can't get enough customers to reach a minimum funding goal, or which is, I would assume, is usually the amount of money needed in order to fund the production that you're trying to do, if you can't get that many people excited about your brand enough, then the watch might not even exist in the first place. And if you have a situation where you just did regular pre-orders yourself, or worst case scenario, let's say you actually took a chance on yourself, bought that stock, and you have a brand, you have a watch that just doesn't connect with buyers, that's catastrophic to especially a smaller company, a newer company, because now you have all the stock that you can't sell. Kickstarter is a very safe way as a brand to kind of leverage that, so that if the watch does not have enough interest, that no one's out any money, the backers don't pay you anything, and all you've spent is, the marketing cost and the pre-production cost and things of that nature, which is still can be very costly, but I suppose it's better than the thousands of dollars that it would cost to actually get a ton of watches manufactured and have them ready to sell. And so from the buyer's perspective, a lot of these companies, especially companies that have been super successful with Kickstarter, we might not have around if not for that previous success on Kickstarter. I think of NTH when I think of that. I think of the Stratton Watch Company, whose watches that I have reviewed before. Sal Baltimore, same thing. Companies that I don't know if they would be around if they had not seen the success on Kickstarter that they did. So if you are passionate about a brand, if you see a brand that comes out that's doing something interesting and new, and they're on Kickstarter, then I would definitely encourage you to take a chance on that, because not taking that chance might mean that you never do get to see that watch, unfortunately. So let's talk about what the cons of Kickstarter are from the buyer standpoint. The first big one for me, and this is actually the reason that I don't typically back a lot of watch Kickstarters, and why I also don't typically pre-order a lot of watches months in advance, and that's because the waiting, to quote Tom Petty, is the hardest part. So again, the whole point of Kickstarter is to get that capital, to get that funding raised before the watch actually goes into full production. So typically from the end of a Kickstarter campaign to when the watch actually hits the backers' doorsteps is typically a minimum of 4 to 5 months, because that's how long it takes for production to get started, for the watches to get shipped, and that could be a super long process. And it can get even worse, actually, the more successful a project is, believe it or not, because if a project really blows up and there's no caps on how many watches are available, if there's no high-end maximum of watches that will be produced, that can often complicate issues. If you go into a project that you only expected to raise, let's say $50,000, but you had enough interest that you raised, let's say $500,000, and you're producing 5 to 10 more times watches than you thought, that might complicate supply chain issues and things of that nature as well. So weirdly enough, the more successful a watch campaign is, the more it might delay the watch hitting your doorstep. I know myself personally, I'm much more of an immediate gratification guy. If I see a watch that I like and I do my research for a couple weeks and know that I want to buy it, I want to be able to buy it and get it right away. I don't like to have to wait. And so that's one of the tougher things as a buyer or a backer of the Kickstarter campaign, is having to wait from the money leaving your wallet to actually getting the product that you backed. The second downside with Kickstarter, the second con, is that if you have a lot of options for your watch, it can often be very confusing to backers that are browsing the site in conveying that information. Kickstarter is not an optimally laid out website, I would say, for presenting information. Again, this is someone that's backed a ton of Kickstarter campaigns, and I've seen some really good ones, I've seen some really bad ones. But the way the Kickstarter website is laid out is basically like a big, long, wall of text and images, and you have to just scroll down this infinite thing. It's very hard to find information that you might be looking for. And with watches, that can kind of complicate matters a little bit as well. This was seen most recently. I just reviewed the Merlin Kickstarter watch that unfortunately did not make it through. And I think that the bevy of options and add-ons was a bit of a detriment, because when you have the backer tiers or the different price brackets that you can back the watch in, it can kind of be confusing sometimes to kind of figure out what exactly are you getting for this money. How much do I pledge if I want to get this extra strap, or how much do I pledge if I want to get this like watch roll that they have available, or any add-on products. Also, watches that have various different colorways. This can be a tricky aspect of the project as well, because if you only have a certain number available of each color, each of those colors pretty much would have to be an individual backer tier on the Kickstarter website. And again, the information, the way it's presented, can just get really confusing. Then you add in, super early bird backer tier, early bird backer tier, regular backer tier, like the different price structures. It can sometimes just be a real mess. And if you don't have a lot of experience navigating the Kickstarter platform, it can kind of seem very confusing and very jumbled as far as what you're actually getting. So the simpler that the projects can be are usually the better. But as a buyer, again, especially if you're newer to Kickstarter, sometimes it can take a little bit more homework than you typically care for to figure out exactly what you're getting with your pledge and exactly how much more you should pledge if you wanted to get these other add-ons and bonuses as well. And finally, the biggest con, and this is one of the other reasons that with watches that I stay away from Kickstarter quite a bit, is because sometimes things can change dramatically. And unfortunately, the way that Kickstarter works is that once your money is in the hands of the backer, that's it. No matter what happens after that, that's their money to do as they will with. Now, I want to be super clear, because this is going to come off potentially sounding kind of scary. This is definitely, this kind of a situation is definitely an exception and definitely not the norm. And I want to be super clear about that up front. But sometimes things can happen with Kickstarter campaigns. And where you see problems arise is typically with brands who are either super inexperienced and didn't really line up their ducks in a row before they started, or campaigns that might have promised too much, that were way too ambitious in what they were offering in the campaign. And then when the firm realities of the production process present themselves, all of a sudden changes have to be made. All of a sudden decisions have to be made differently than what we saw in the campaign. And what do I mean by this? Well, let's just say, for example, you want to launch your watch with an ETA 2824 movement inside of it. And let's say the campaign is super successful beyond, what you were expecting the results of the campaign to be. But now all of a sudden you need, twice as many ETA movements that you originally anticipated needing, and you don't have access to that. Well, all of a sudden now you have to change what movement is going to be in your watch. And you might have backers who pledged for the campaign saying, oh, I'm going to get a watch with an ETA 2824. But all of a sudden, if you switch it to a Sellita 200-1, for example, even though they're essentially the same movement, there are watch people out there who are going to take offense to that. And they're going to be pissed, and they're going to say, this is not the watch that I pledged for. This is not the product that I put my money down to. I don't know that I would have bought this if it was a different movement inside of it. So perhaps the prototype of the case, wasn't going to quite come out the same way in manufacturing. Maybe the bracelet is going to be slightly different than what, the prototype ended up being once we get to manufacturing. This is all stuff that is very possible to come up during the production process of a wristwatch. And as a Kickstarter backer, that's something you have to be aware of. It's something you have to kind of go into with eyes open. Now, any campaign worth its salt, if they had to make major changes like that, would certainly offer you a refund if you weren't satisfied with those changes, or if you get the final product and you aren't satisfied with what you have in your hands at the end of the day. I would hope that they'd offer you a refund, but I want to be super clear. Nowhere in Kickstarter's, terms of service does it require them to. And I haven't seen this in the watch industry, but I did see it a handful of times in the tabletop industry, where if a project just completely flies off the rails and completely fails, and that money gets spent though regardless, like if the money gets spent on a failed production, but there's no end product, well then guess what? You're just out that money because you took a chance on backing this company, and unfortunately they didn't come through for you. In most cases, that's not going to be the actual outcome, but it is still important to note that it is certainly a possibility. And just like when you buy anything else out there, you should be buying the brand as much as you are buying the product. And I want to be super clear. I was worried the cons would sound super negative, because I do think that Kickstarter is a net positive for the watch industry as a whole. There's a lot of brands that wouldn't have seen the light of day if not for Kickstarter. I don't think that we would have seen the microbrand boom that we've seen if not for Kickstarter. The tabletop industry saw a similar renaissance. But I just think it's super important to kind of just go in as a buyer with clear eyes as far as what to expect when you are going into a Kickstarter project. And I would say, again, my biggest advice backing projects from new brands is just make sure that you're really buying into the brand. Make sure that you're not getting into a campaign where they're over-promising. Like, if there's a lot of stuff in that campaign that sounds too good to be true for the price that they're charging, that's, it usually is in a lot of cases. So again, just be smart, have your eyes open, and make sure you are backing responsibly when it comes to watches on Kickstarter. So guys, that is it for this video. Let me know what your experiences have been like in terms of backing watch Kickstarters down in the comments below. I'd be super curious to hear your stories. If you guys liked this video, hit the thumb button down below. If you loved it, click the red subscribe button and ring the bell icon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all the next time.